morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to all. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar on how to leverage tech learning for competitive advantage in partnership with Pluralsight. I am Ritu from People Matters, and before moving to the agenda of today, let me brief you about our webinar topic for the day. In this one-hour session, we will try to understand how cutting-edge Indian tech firms are leveraging their learning agendas and how you can apply these principles in your organization. We'll focus on three main areas: trends in Indian technology learning market, elements of holistic learning development, and how to enable culture of learning. We have a wonderful set of speakers for today's session. So let me now introduce you to Arun Rajamani, who is Country Head of Pluralsight India. Arun is an IT industry veteran, having managed large businesses in India and Asia Pacific. Since April 2015, he has been spearheading the country operations for Pluralsight India, with an objective of making Pluralsight a synonymous brand with technology learning and to positively impact the lives of over 2 million developers in India. Prior to Pluralsight, he headed the government, healthcare and education vertical at Microsoft India and was focused on addressing the needs of enterprise customers, government organizations and students for over 15 years. We have Sanjay Kumar with us, who is Vice President Capability Development at ITC Infotech. The Capability Development function is tasked with skill and capability upgrade activities across the entire organization and also innovating on learning techniques using newer methods and formats. Sanjay has also heads the initiatives across HR on leveraging analytics as a meaningful tool for bringing a sharper focus on key strategic areas of processes and people management. Our partner for today's webinar session is Pluralsight. Pluralsight, founded in 2004, is the global leader in online learning for professional software developers, IT specialists, and creative technologists. As world's largest curated professional development platform, the company offers instant access to more than 4,700 courses authored by top experts with customers in more than 150 countries. Pluralsight serves as a career catalyst, delivering hands-on practical training for most in-demand and understaffed jobs of today. We have a very exciting format today. We'll have a presentation by Arun. Then then Sanjay will share his experience and expertise, followed by Arun sharing a brief on Pluralsight with us. We'll have a combined question answer session for Arun and Sanjay. I request all to please sending us your questions in question answer tab, and we'll take them to the end of the session. So without any further delay, I am handing over to Arun. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ritu, for the very kind introductions, and a very warm welcome to all the participants on the webinar today. And also a very special thanks to Sanjay for taking time off to be with us in today's session. Thank you, Sanjay. Sanjay is a great industry practitioner, and he's had several transforming workforces in his career. So we are fortunate to have him with us today, and to listen to what he's done and to take away learnings from his experiences as well. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, my objective is to give all of you on the call a sense of all of the opportunities as well as the challenges that we face in the industry today. These are not new, and everybody on the call, I'm sure, has experienced some of these opportunities or challenges. But the idea is to take away a few things that continue to exist that we need to solve. And going forward, Sanjay's session could possibly be a solution for many of the problems that we'll talk about in the next 10 minutes. So this topic is great. It's about leveraging tech learning for competitive advantage, and what better reference to have than what Jack Welch mentioned to the entire world about 2 decades ago. And he said any organization's ability to learn and translate that learning into action really is the competitive advantage. And if you look at it in the present times, even though this quote was made about 2 decades ago, it's still so relevant to all of us. And why it's relevant is because the entire industry around us is shifting, is changing. Irrespective of what industry you represent today on the call, it suffices to say that a lot of things that existed as models, let's say 10 years ago, is either changed or is no longer relevant today. We've seen so many examples of organizations whose business models have changed. We've seen so many examples of how the competitive environment around us has changed. We've seen examples of how buying patterns have changed, of solutions changing, and also of technology that changes so rapidly. So if we put a context around this to the IT industry, the first big opportunity that we have in front of us is that as a country, we are going to become the world's largest as far as technology developers are concerned. So we're going to be the nation that's going to have the most number of tech professionals by 2017. We will surpass the US. And one of the core reasons for this is that we have so many engineering graduates who pass out every year, and most of them today are looking for careers in the information technology industry. But is that a good measure to finding out that, just because we're going to become the world's largest nation with technology developers, is that something that we should be proud of? Or what are the challenges that we will encounter while we grow to this size today? One of the biggest opportunities, which also is a big challenge for us, is that as we grow to become the world's largest nation, as far as tech developers are concerned, we also should understand that this industry is also now embracing new skills as far as technology is concerned. We polled several customers in India to understand their views of what they think are going to be the core skills that are required. Almost 60% of them came back and said that they are now focused on big data and analytics. Another 50% came back and said digital technologies are very, very important to them. 60% of them came back and said that their focus over the next few years is going to be on embracing cutting-edge technologies. But it suffices to say that today, the skills that are going to become relevant, which will sustain organizations into the near future, are going to be the new skills and not the mature skills that have been the way business has been happening as far as the industry is concerned. And how confident is this industry about the new age skills that are required? Most of them came back and said that the biggest worry they have is their ability to adapt and to make sure that the employees in their organizations actually are able to embrace those skills. So skill building, skill transformation, and the ability for organizations to embrace these new skills that are required in the industry are the biggest problems that most practitioners and most business heads to industry feel. So it is a challenge that all of us will have to sort of put our minds together and see what we can do to solve. So when we polled, some of our business leaders to finding out if they were, or rather what their biggest issues would be as far as skills are concerned, these business leaders came back to us and said that the top 2 problems as far as their business is concerned were how could the quality of employee skills be bettered. So it's not enough if you have the world's largest numbers, but also the quality of those skills that are required for them to make a difference to the world is also going to be the key issue. And second biggest problem that most business practitioners came back to us and said was their ability to keep pace with these technology advances as they actually transition into models of the future. And everything else, productivity, operational costs, and other issues that have been traditionally the biggest problems of business are now actually relegated to lesser priorities. So the 2 biggest problems that the business owners, I'm not referring to HR practitioners, I'm not referring to learning heads, but I'm referring to the business heads. They come back and tell us that quality of skills and the ability for their people to learn new skills, to keep pace with technology challenges remain 2 of the biggest problems that they want to solve. And when we asked them what was the reason they believe that these two challenges are the biggest, they came back and said that it is very difficult for them to find the right kind of talent out in the market. And this is something that's been a nagging problem for us in the industry. It is always more expensive to hire people with the right skills, and it's also time consuming. Most of us who work in projects, if we are in the IT industry, work on a model where we need skills just in time. So we pick up projects and we want skills immediately, and those skills have to be available in the market. Now that was okay when we looked at mature technologies. We looked at .NET, we looked at Java. It was okay for us because in those models, those skills were available in plenty. But when you look at big data skills, when you look at analytics skills, when you look at mobility skills, the number of employees that are available out in the market or professionals who are available in the market that can be hired real time are very, very few. So how do you then deal with this issue? That becomes the problem that the industry is trying to solve. And that's why most of the business owners today feel that hiring people real time with the right technical talent is one of the largest challenges that's contributing to their ability to grow the business. The second problem that they mentioned to us was as they hire people and as they skill people, are they able to retain that talent? Because when people get skilled, they also have the expectation that they go back and demonstrate those skills in new age projects. They demonstrate the skills in higher paying jobs. So how does the company also and the industry at large find a solution where when people get skilled, they're actually able to place them in the right products, right projects and in the right kind of jobs so that the maximum can be extracted from these individuals? The third biggest problem they came back and said was the culture of learning and how do you actually enable a culture of learning. So the top three problems that were contributing the issues related to business growth were finding the right talent, retaining the people that were actually skilled, and third, institutionalizing a culture of learning within the organization. So for us, we come back and call this syndrome one of the core problems. That's called a technology 2-year half-life. So from the chart that you see here, right from 1995 until 2016, maybe in the last decade and a little more than that, you find that skills are changing. Technology is changing fairly rapidly, right? What we knew of in 1995 with Java and what we see as some of the technologies that have become prevalent in 2015, which includes AngularJS, Tableau, and so on. There's so many changes, so many new technologies, so many new platforms have been introduced. So if you look at the ability of people to be relevant today, our theory is that if a person has a particular skill, in 2 years from now, only half of that person's skill sets are going to be relevant because technology is changing so rapidly. So, which means half of what your organization's overall skills exist are only going to be relevant every 2 years. So as a practitioner on the call today, you need to be aware that if you do not look at a continuous learning model and to look at understanding what are the core skills that are going to become important in the future and invest in your associates' learning time to build new skills, you will find yourself in an organization where the skills are going to be less relevant than what it was before. And that shift is happening very, very rapidly. So I recognize that this slide may not be very readable or legible, and it's a very busy slide. But what I wanted to highlight to you here was the effort that Pluralsight as a company is taking today is to really understand what are the skills and what are the technologies that are becoming relevant in the future. So what you see in this sort of radar chart, the core of the radar chart right at the center are those skills and those technologies that are preferred today. And as you go outwards towards the end, those are technologies and skills that you may want to start avoiding because those are becoming lesser and lesser relevant. So as an example, if I may to take, on the platform side, right, what is relevant today if you take, IT operations as an example? Windows Server 2012 continues to be a skill that the industry feels is going to be very, very relevant. Whereas what you would try and avoid as you go out is, technologies like WordPress, technologies like MS SQL Server. These are, from an infrastructure and IT ops standpoint, becoming skills that are going to be less relevant for organizations, and they need to avoid these skills and rather invest in skills that are going to be more relevant. So similarly, if you take tools, a lot of organizations are today investing in Agile as methodologies or Agile as tools. And you find that that's actually now starting to become less relevant. What is becoming more and more preferred today in the industry, which is going to sustain the next decade, are practices like Lean, practices like TeamCity. These are the ones that are going to become more relevant. So as a company, we're investing a lot of time, effort, and applying our research, really understanding where the industry is heading, what is going to lead in the industry, and accordingly try and come back to you with solutions that are going to make it relevant. So going back to the research we conducted in India, when we polled some of the business leaders to understanding what their opinion of the learning and development function is in their organization, and did they see value. And the good news is that almost every practitioner, every business head came back and said that they feel the learning and development function continues to be one that's very, very critical in the sustenance of their business and to support the growth. They want learning and development to help them keep pace with technology. They want learning and development to look at how they could innovate and drive more innovation. They want L&D to help in the survival against competition. And they all felt without fail that it was super critical for L&D to be there and to be doing what they're doing, perhaps with more efficiency, to drive better growth within the organization. So when we asked them again the next question to say, what would they like their learning and development function to be focused on? The top two areas that they wanted L&D to be focused on was, one, to develop high potential employees, and second, to help them retain that talent. The two biggest problems that actually exist as far as business is concerned. And if you go down, if you're able to read the slide, if you go down in the order of priority, you'll find that one of the areas which is rated really, really low today, which is processes where every employee should undergo training, is rated the third from the bottom. And not more than 25% of the people have actually said that that's an important aspect to look at. But if we are practitioners and we are learning and development heads within organizations, if we just take a step back and understand where do we really focus our time today, this is the area that most of us spend our time, which is to make sure that our employees undergo some form of training and to look at the standard processes that support that. Whereas what your business is expecting you to do is to actually look at impacting employees for high potential and growth, and to look at how you could help them retain that talent as soon as people are skilled. Those are the two areas they want you to focus more time and effort on. And then we asked them what would their view of an ideal state be for learning and development. And the two areas that they came back to us with overwhelmingly was, first, making sure that all the learning areas were aligned to business priorities. And B, they wanted the learning and development practitioners to involve their employees in every single decision that's being made and in every single program that's being rolled out. So often, this is interesting feedback, because often as practitioners and as business heads, we go back and believe that we decide what employees should learn. And we let them know we are very prescriptive about courses, about content, about areas that cater to what the business demand is. Whereas we should really be finding a balance between what the business demand is, what the business priorities are, and looking at what the employee priorities are. Because unless we map that, we will not have employees who are going to be developed as high potential talent. And second, retention becomes that much more difficult for us to do. So clearly, aligning content, aligning learning needs to the business objectives, and making sure that employees are part of that process are the areas that define an ideal state as far as your business heads are concerned. Now, if that's what businesses asked us to do, hello? If this is what businesses asked you to do, where would you look at your time that's being spent today, right? This is a great representation of how time gets spent in most organizations. Along the x-axis, you find what the L&D's priorities are, and along the y-axis, from top to bottom, you see the technology maturity curve. So it almost tells you that the extreme left bottom corner are technologies which are very mature and where the L&D priority should actually be low. But if you actually look at where the time is spent today, it tells you that it's an inverted curve. Most of the time today by the L&D function is actually spent in technologies that are very mature, and the amount of time that's spent today on technologies that are redefining what an organization's future would be, which is the top right-hand corner box, the amount of time that's being spent is very, very little today. Even though the priority is high, the amount of time that is being spent today is the lowest. So it tells us that today we are trying to spend more time to keep the lights on rather than try and transform our business. So the core topic that we have today is how do you really transform your workforce? This is really the problem that we need to solve within every organization, that we need to have a way to keep continuous learning active, to making sure that employees are learning new skills while ensuring that they are going to deliver for the current requirement and keeping the lights on. So is it a challenge to do that? It's absolutely a challenge, right? And let's look at what are a couple of these challenges today. One, most organizations tend to focus on the traditional forms, which is instructor-led training, to be doing that. We are not coming back to saying that ILT is not great or ILT is not effective. We're only saying that ILT cannot be the only medium on which you can build your learning strategy within the organization. And business practitioners today also feel that instructor-led training is not giving them the kind of returns that they're expecting it to. The top three problems, they think that it's time-consuming because people are spending, time away from their work trying to get trained. Second, it's a very high cost compared to other forms of learning. And the third, today, the quality of the trainer determines the effectiveness of learning. And those are the top three problems that continue to haunt business owners who feel that this is probably not the right way to be investing for the future. So it suffices to say that we should now start looking for new models of training or new models for learning, where you need to have a mix and a balance of different forms of learning within your portfolio. So let's just take a couple of examples as we see this. Most of the learning we know happens on the job. So we polled a few customers in the US, and we understood that in the US, on an average, an organization spends about $1,800 training an employee on the job. Training an employee, rather. This is all forms of learning, all forms of training. And most of them who were surveyed agreed with the fact that 80% of the learning today happens on the job. And yet 70% of them came back and said that the biggest challenge they have is that they don't have relevant skills. So think about this, that you spend $1,800, but you do not get the return that it is actually supposed to drive. So where is the challenge? If learning happens on the job, then the forms of training that we do and the form of learning that employees go through, is that the right mechanism for them to be learning while delivering on the job? And the answer is no. So that's clearly a challenge that we have to find a solution for. And so how do some organizations look at that, and how have they started to look at solving this problem? And Sanjay is going to be talking about that in a few minutes, and he would have some great examples to share, I'm sure. So most of them today continue to believe that instructor-led or the old forms of training are the ones to bet on. Again, we know it's high cost and it's not going to be scalable. Some of them have actually been betting on one e-learning source, which actually complements our instructor-led training models. It's given them some benefit, but they've also started to realize that one single source is not going to be giving them the effectiveness that they need. And a few of them who are the thought leaders within the organization, within the industries, I would say, have actually started now to go towards a free marketplace model, where internally within an organization, there is a marketplace created, there's choice provided. An employee who wants to learn a particular technology or a skill is free to choose from several options that are available. An employee makes the best choice that he or she thinks will drive the greatest effectiveness for that person. And that choice is actually leading to more learning and more agility within the organization today. So my last slide before I conclude, as part of the learning portfolio and to drive learning effectiveness, we have to think about several things, right? We have to think about new age models. We have to think about a balance between several models of learning that gives choice to the employee. But we will also not do justice to this entire new model that we are trying to launch if we did not consider 4 key aspects that are going to redefine how learning happens. The first is people need to learn on the go. People need to learn when they are in a position to learn most effectively. And mobility is a key part of that strategy that you have to consider. Second, virtual learning is sort of becoming absolutely critical because it's not enough if people can just go to a classroom to learn or people can actually go to a self-paced learning site to learn. There also needs to be augmented with other forms of learning such as learning by doing, practicing what they're actually doing. So those aspects of learning also become very important in the learning strategy that you need to pursue. The third is, at least as far as the millennials are concerned, learning will have to be more fun. Gamification and a competitive environment of learning is going to become absolutely critical for the workforce of today. So in your learning strategy, you will have to consider how gamification becomes an integral component of your execution. And the last is, people just don't want to learn on their own. People want to learn with others. So social learning, especially for this generation, is going to become a very effective tool to enhance how people actually learn more effectively. So whether it's going to be WhatsApp, whether it is going to getting onto your internal collaboration tools, or to tools such as what Pluralsight has, these are going to become important aspects for you to consider your learning strategy. So think about mobility, think virtual, think gamification, and think social as you start to look at how your internal learning strategy evolves to address all the challenges that the business has been talking about. So that's the last slide that I had, and we'd be happy to take questions towards the end. And, it's my pleasure now to hand this over to Sanjay and to hear from Sanjay how he's looked at solving some of these problems that we just talked about for the last 15 minutes. So Sanjay, over to you. Thank you again for taking the time off to be with us today.
Thank you, Arun. Good morning, everyone. This is Sanjay. Arun has raised very valid points, and these have been part of some of the discussions which we have had. Part of the discussions and part of the challenges which we face is also because more and more we have a very, very dispersed workforce. More than that dispersed workforce, it's a known fact, the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, different generations have different learning approaches. Compound that with a challenge. When should we as learning professionals look at building up an entirely new skill grounds up or look at skill upgrade? There is a huge cost and time trade-offs which do happen in both of them. Arun did mention early on in terms of how some of the technologies are evolving and how the uptake is. The latest craze which has been around is AngularJS. Everyone wants to jump onto that bandwagon. It's front end. We talk about customer experience, employee experiences, and that is part of the area where AngularJS does get applied. But is training enough? Training just provides concepts. Training just provides the structure of the language. Training just provides the framework. The utilization of that, how do we get it to from the learning to the deployment side is one of the bigger challenges which we face. And lastly, along with the technical skills, with today's generation, we do need to look at how do we build on to the behavioral skill sides of activity. And these are the kind of challenges which what I'm talking about is skill development, the agility which is required in skill development today, and this is what I call agile learning. Agile learning, what does it make a difference? We started on this journey of utilizing digital modes. And digital modes was, I'm just going back to Arun's last slide, which was talking about virtual learning, which was talking about e-learning, which was talking about mobility. These are all perspectives of digital learning. Whether it's concepts, e-learning comes in very helpful. Virtual live learning combined with the cloud-based sandboxes provide us the ability to get people to start practicing those languages, not just during the training, but after the training is concluded, try to look at what can I do with it? How do I experiment with it? How do I cement that skill? And that side is critical. Game-based. And game-based, let me just go back to a little bit. I have kids, and traditionally we have been telling them, don't play games, don't spend time on the computers. A lot of you would have also been in the same situation, either on the receiving end or onto providing that advice. I've changed my mindset. And I've changed my mindset with the two grown-up kids who are at high school and college level. Games, important. Why are they important? Quick judgments, decision-making speed, ability to find out where I went wrong and correct it. Let people do that in a virtual environment instead of in front of a client. That is what is learning today evolving to. That is where the gaming is bringing on a huge difference also in terms of building up people's skills. And I would say, let the kids play the games. Within a meaningful time, but let them play the games. They require those skills. Let me move to the second aspect which I talk about, which is on generations and different learning styles. One of the challenges we realized early on when we started on the journey, we took away the entire social perspective of having other people around us while we are learning and substituted that with self-learning. Some of the generations started finding that as a challenge. You have to be applying yourself to the learning before you can start utilizing the learning concepts. Classrooms, automatically there was a forced level of schedule to be followed, forced level of learning, people around me. So it was a kind of a communal learning which was happening. What does that take away? We have to look at how do we get them to start adopting this self-learning, bringing in this level of self-discipline. What we started doing was to blend it in. Have some hours of e-learning, put it as a gate checkpoint, and then bring them into the classroom to start discussing certain items, whether it's a role play, whether it's a competition. Today, into the digital learning modes, the social environment is taking hold hugely. If you look at any standard e-learning platform or a gaming platform, there are competitions which are going on between learners. Who's learned better? Who's picked up more points? Those items are bringing back that kind of a social environment of learning, the excitement back into the learning, and let's say it plainly. We need to get people to be used to that and to leverage that to get them enthused about learning and learning on a self-disciplined, self-driven mode. Last item. Gone are the days when we could run 2 weeks, 3 weeks workshops or training classes. Project pressures. Getting people into the classrooms takes a huge amount of effort. That is what I talk about is bite-sized learning, shorter cycles. Some of our classroom training we modified to run only for 2 or 3 days, not more than that. And out of those 2 or 3 days, one day typically ends up being a Saturday, which is one of the trade-offs which we do with our projects, because our delivery managers start cribbing about what is the billing loss they are incurring sending people to the training, and training which might be driven by their own personal use of the individual. So they are not willing to buy into that. Run some trainings on Saturday combined. More important, because of the diverse workforce, geographically dispersed. Guys, and this is something I have been asking a lot of our associates, and some of them have responded very positively. Why cannot you do a discipline of spending 1 hour or 2 hours of learning a week? Not too much to ask. And believe me, the quantum of learning which starts coming into play is huge. Don't look at learning up an entirely new stage. Look at what skills you already have and then start adding to that. Don't try reinventing the wheel. Add in those finer points of the wheel, the ribs across the wheel, which will allow us to drive faster and still smoother. This is where the agility within learning is coming about. future, one of the things which I'm targeting for myself, we are already reaching around 20% of our learning contributing from digital modes. Over the next year, can I stabilize it around 40 to 50%? And that for today would be an ideal balance. Over time, maybe 2 or 3 years down, that equation might change. But this is an achievement which I want to try and put across. Social environments drive the competitions. Instead of letting people compete into a smaller group, let people compete on to learning in a much larger society across the organization. And set up examples like that so that then people get aware that if I do learning, I, one, get better projects, two, I get recognized publicly. And those are huge incentives to get people to start learning. Super specializations. Yes, when we start talking about from big data and data sciences to now look at AngularJS only, there will be super specializations. And I come from a generation where we were jack of all trades. We would do every step of the activity across the development life cycle and still be able to deliver. These are the days of super specializations. You're a specialist. However, the specialist also needs to look at a perspective of bridging the gaps from my adjacent areas. If I am working on to, let's say, Tableau, I need to understand what the data scientist in my team is thinking through, because I need to convert that thinking to a visible output for my client. What is the information coming? So how am I doing data cleansing? How am I looking at using some of the unstructured data to be fed into that? I need to interface with some of my big data teams. These are all the areas which start making a lot of difference in terms of people picking up some of these skills and being fully aware. What I was talking on gamification, I think it makes a difference. Last item. We are now talking, and we might be heading for what I call the Uber and the Ola model of software development. When I want a skill, I subscribe it from the market. But that means people have to be up to that skill. I will have a bigger marketplace. It destroys the entire perspective of having an organizational structure and gets into a virtual mode even onto the software development. That's a thing for the future, but that is something which is sooner than later going to hit us. Now, most of us on this call are HR or learning and development professionals. I have a few questions. How many of us understand what is happening in the technology environment? This is critical. If we have to use learning and development as a competitive advantage, we as professionals in this field also need to understand what is happening in the industry. Without that, we will be unable to provide that kind of a competitive advantage. We will still be in the traditional model where we respond to project-based demands of learning. We will not be responding to the people aspirations of developing into their career. Learning and development needs to move ahead of delivery. It's not a simple statement to make. I come from the delivery background. We need the skills ready there before delivery starts asking for them. Challenge, it's a cost perspective. It is also a opportunity cost loss perspective. Both sides have to be looked at onto that. And that is where I would say we need to collaborate with the technology innovators. India is gaining a huge amount of publicity in terms of innovation and the kind of innovation we are bringing in. We need to understand from these people, these skilled people, these professionals, where are we heading? It will become a matter of strategy within the organization, but we can be the contributors in terms of providing these kind of inputs. These are some of the things which I picked up purely from what I was looking at. I will hand control back over to Arun before we step into the Q&A. All yours, Arun.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. That was really enlightening. What you talked about from a perspective of digital modes of learning or looking at super specialization, I think so correct and so valid for the industry going forward as well. So thank you for sharing those perspectives with us. So over the next few, so just waiting for the slides to be loaded. So Ritu, if you could just load the next set of presentations, please. Thank you very much. So over the next, let's say 5 to 7 minutes, the focus would be to introduce Pluralsight as a company to you and how we could help solve some of the problems that we've been talking about, especially from a perspective of content that's becoming more new age from a digital standpoint, learning modes that are turning more digital, and also looking at enabling the workforce that actually needs to learn at its own pace. So before we go ahead, just a quick introduction to who we are. So Pluralsight is, one of the world's largest content providers for technology professionals, and we are the largest as far as curated content is concerned. And I use a word called curated because what we provide is content that's actually managed so well such that the experience that a learner gets is one of the highest, and the learning effectiveness that a learner gets is one of the highest too. Our focus is to create content which is of very high quality and of very high depth, because the way we do that is to develop content in association with subject matter experts who are not Pluralsight employees but who are the best in the industry. And we share our profits with them, which keeps these authors of the content highly motivated and incented to keep the content not just relevant but also extremely current. So when you get into our library, or when your learners get into our library, what they see is the content that's been curated for the best experience, content that's extremely relevant, and content that's also very current, that mirrors what the industry today is seeking. So that's what we do. We also believe that content is not the only experience that a learner would need. So we believe in connected experiences. So right from the time we help in assessing an individual's capabilities to the perspectives that we can provide or recommendations we can provide to a learner on what he or she would need to learn, and also then to point them to the right courses within a huge library of 5,000 courses, is what we do to enhance how a learner can be most motivated to learn what's most relevant to the individual's goals and also to the areas that is most pertinent to the individual's needs. So, we also believe that, technology teams that are part of your organizations need, experiences that are going to be very different. They need to always look at ways and means to stay up to date and understand, what the technology changes are. And Sanjay actually talked about the point that as practitioners, we first need to be up to speed on that. And then we also need to understand what would that translate to what our employees or associates would need. So how do we help, professionals stay up to date? We also ensure that if they understand what needs to be learned to stay up to date, we also help them evaluate and learn and implement those technologies by being hands-on. And we've proven that we've enabled successful technology teams by helping them onboard and to making sure that they are actually now able to contribute back to the business real time. So that's what we've been doing, for the last 10 plus years that we've been in business today. And as I mentioned at the start of this, this part of the conversation today, we actually help associates and we also help organizations move at the speed of technology. So the moment you find a new technology that comes into the market, you can be rest assured that if it is pertaining to developers, or if it's pertaining to IT operations, or if it's pertaining to creative professionals, you would find a course that's relevant to that particular area that's been introduced on our library. That's the speed at which we are actually able to move and impact people's lives. In my first presentation, I talked about the 2-year half-life syndrome, which means that your team's skills are half as relevant every 2 years as you go along. And probably that velocity is going to change even faster. It might be that, in the next 5 years, every year, half the skills that your team knows becomes less relevant. So how do you ensure that you're able to keep pace with that change and cross-skill and upskill people? We move at that speed to make sure that we understand your demands and we're able to cater to those demands as well. So I'm going to, over the next 5-6 slides, just take you through a sneak peek of what our platform looks like. I'm not doing a live demo. These are screenshots, but this should give you a good indication of what your learner would see when he or she logs into the Pluralsight library. So as soon as the person logs in, the first thing that the person sees is what are the newest releases that we've had. And the person can also see what are the most popular courses that are being seen in the industry too. So it gives them an indication of what new courses have come in that pertains to new technology areas, and also what are the most popular courses that people are taking across the globe that points them to the direction of areas that they need to be looking at skilling themselves as well. People can create playlists on their own. So once they see new courses or they see popular courses, they can add that to their playlist and they can go back and review them later. And every time a person finishes a part of the course, there's a bookmark that's left to allow that individual to take off from where he or she left the training. So it's always continuous, it's always up to date. That's how easy it is to navigate through our library and to also see what's most relevant to them. Across these courses, you would also see a set of stars. Sanjay pointed out to the Uber and the Ola models that are there, and this is a classical model. This is crowdsourced rating of what a course means. So the popularity of a course is actually now coming in from how hundreds and thousands of users who have gone through a particular course have rated the course, rated the relevance, and have also rated the author. So it makes it easy for a new learner or for any learner getting into the Pluralsight library to pick the courses that are most relevant, the most impactful, and also the most popular. And so therefore, the learning is going to be much, much better. And I talked about the fact that it's not enough if we just provide great content. We also need to make sure that we point people to the most relevant content that pertains to their goals, that pertains to their capabilities as well. So how do you assess capabilities? And that's a huge problem today that many companies have. So what we've done is we've created assessments across skill paths. So let's assume that there is a professional who wants to become an AngularJS professional. And Sanjay talked about the fact that today that's the buzzword. Everybody wants to be doing AngularJS programming. So we've created a skill path around Angular. And what it does is it creates a set of curated content areas, courses that are ranked by beginner, intermediate, and advanced for Angular. So by going through those set of courses, a technology professional would be able to increase skills in Angular as a platform and Angular as a skill. So at the end of spending, let's say, 90 hours of training, a person can be a good professional with advanced level skills on AngularJS as a platform. So how do we do the assessments? So which actually points out to understanding what a person's capability is. So you would see in this particular slide that we have a way to measure skill levels. So within 20 questions, using an adaptive assessments engine, we should be able to assess the capability of an individual on, let's say, JavaScript or Angular as a technology area or as a skill area. And how does this work? We have a set of questions that have been curated, and it's all crowdsourced, and it's randomly administered to an individual. So as an individual starts to take a course, let's say the first 2 or 3 questions is going to be an order of merit, which is going to be easy questions. The person answers those questions, let's say, correctly, then progressively the questions keep getting tougher and tougher. Let's say at some point in time, the individual makes a mistake, then easier questions starts to get administered. So the algorithm that we have, which is part of our assessment engine, is trying to administer different questions with different proficiency levels to assess what an individual is actually responding to and how an individual is responding to. And at the end of 20 questions, a very accurate assessment and a score is given for that particular individual. And what you see here is a score that's come, let's say, at the end of a particular session that a person has done or a test that a person has done for Angular, and the score, let's say, is 81. Now, you as an L&D practitioner working with business within your organization can define what benchmark scores you want to have. So in this case, we've shown that proficient is between 100 and 200, advanced or an expert is between 200 and 300, and a novice is between a 0 and 100. So let's say I took this course and I'm not a technologist, and I've landed a score of, let's say, 81. I can then look at this and say, okay, I'm a novice. So what it will help me do is to go straight into the content that we have curated for beginner level and start to take courses that are there for beginners. This is a huge, huge advantage that practitioners and business owners get, because rather than putting people through a normal core or set of courses, either instructor-led or self-paced, here you have the ability to point people to the set of courses that are most important and most relevant to their proficiency levels. So this is where learning starts to become more personalized. The course assignment becomes more personalized, and therefore the learning impact and the learning effectiveness is going to be the highest. Now, during the process, let's say that we've gone through the job of assessing an individual. We've looked at the scores. We pointed them to the right learning paths that are going to be most important to their proficiency levels. We also realize that people do need help, because social learning is such an important aspect. People want to learn when they have a problem from somebody else who's considered to be an expert. So what we've introduced is mentoring sessions which are live, where a number of mentors are available across different platforms and skill sets across the globe. And for a fee, the learner can ping and can get connected with a learner of choice, a mentor of choice. And what the mentor would do is to basically look at addressing what the learning needs of the individual are going to be. So in this case, for a particular, let's say AngularJS, the person is connected with a mentor, could be sitting anywhere across the globe, and is connected and bought a few minutes of airtime that the person wants. The platform allows people to actually record what their questions are and get answers real time. The platform also allows people to get some of their problems assessed in a practical setting. For example, you want to write code and you want to find out if the code is correct. The expert sitting on the other side would actually be able to assess that code and come back and say, hey, you know what, these are the areas that your code looks like, it's great, but here is how you could write code more effectively or more efficiently. So it becomes much more instantaneous. It becomes something which can allow people to collaborate and learn. Right now, this is available for individuals to buy mentor time from any individual across the globe. We are in the process of working out an enterprise version of this, which will actually allow enterprises to put their mentors and their learners on this platform and allow people to collaborate and learn. Just imagine a huge, huge advantage people get by learning from others while also learning through a self-paced model, which allows them to be most effective in terms of what they want to learn. The other thing we talked about also was the fact that mobility needs to be an important component of your strategy. And Sanjay talked about this as a digital model for learning. So we talked about, the mentorship platform that is actually going to enable social learning, as well as the ability for people to practice what they've learned in association with mentors. That becomes virtual training as well. Now, we also have a highly effective way to roll this out through mobile devices. So should any of your associates have an Android or iOS phone or an Apple phone, they would be able to use the Pluralsight content on the go. And the good part is that the entire user experience is so seamless across devices that if they have learned in a desktop and they switch over to a mobile device, everything about them, the profiles, the learning paths, the bookmarks, the playlists, automatically get translated or transferred to the mobile device as well. So which means that learning on the go becomes extremely effective as far as learning is concerned. So with that, I'll conclude the discussion today and we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Arun. Thank Thank you, Sanjay, for such an insightful session. So we have received three questions from our audiences. So the first one is from Sandeep. He's asking, is there a way to mitigate the risk of employees leaving the organization after getting trained?
I'll probably direct that question to Sanjay. Being an experienced practitioner and he deals with these issues, I think, every day. It'd be great to hear from him as to how he's addressing these.
Sure.
I think what I responded on the web directly already is that one, our recruiters are getting smarter about differentiating between what is a book knowledge and what is a applied knowledge. Two, a receiving organization is less likely to give you an insight into a new project using that new technology, so you need your old organization to get that first project done. If today we provide our employees the excitement and the liberty to chart their own path in terms of career growth, believe me, and these are based on certain analytics which we ran internally, the cost differential or the salary differential could be compressed. So you have to promote them, you have to reward them. However, one of the things which is there is they will stay with you for a longer duration because they know, one, they are getting new learning opportunities, two, they are getting into newer areas. And that is a huge retention tool.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Sanjay.
So our next question is from Tina. She's saying, what could be the key actions to create a culture of learning when we talk about IT industry specifically?
Okay. Sanjay, would you like to take
Arun,
that?
Do you want to go ahead?
Add on.
Okay, I will do that.
Sanjay,
I think the culture.
Yeah.
The culture of learning makes a difference. One, but they are not coming under work pressure because they're missing multiple days from work, and nobody takes care of your workload, so you have to go back and address it. What I was speaking during my presentation was 1 to 2 hours of learning. 1 to 2 hours of learning over a quarter, 1 to 2 hours of learning every week. So it's not too much to ask. Over a quarter, you have picked up 2 to 3 new areas very easily. What it translates to is better opportunities internally. What it also means is people then get enthused. I'm not affecting my workload. I'm still learning. I'm still getting newer opportunities. Arun, you want to add more?
No, those are great points. I'll just add one additional point to what you mentioned, Sanjay. And I think, culture of learning is going to be quite unique to every organization because it will have to integrate with the organization's culture as well. But one thing would be very important for us to understand is how do you really recognize and reward people when they have learned and they have applied that learning on the job? And that's the point that Sanjay mentioned about retention as well. If you're able to show people that their learning has been recognized, their impact to the business has been recognized, and therefore they also see growth coming in within the organization, then people start to become more serious learners. And what we call, from a Pluralsight perspective, we actually now encourage people to have career, visions. We encourage people to actually dream about growing within the organization, because only when they start to look at becoming ambitious and they start to looking at wanting to grow in their careers within an organization, do they start to learn and upskill themselves. So making sure that the organization's growth is balancing out with the individual's aspirations for growth and recognizing learning during that process is what is going to help land a culture of learning.
Thank you both, Arun and Sanjay. So let's move on to our next question, which is how to equip the employees to adopt online learning models.
Okay. Sanjay, again, I'm sure the audience wants to understand how you've done it in the organization, and I'll definitely like to chip in.
I think over the first initial stage, we faced this challenge. What we started doing was to look at this set of learning or these areas of learning. We will divert people to virtual modes of learning. It became initially a push. Later, as people have grown more comfortable, and this is still a fraction of the people within the organization, they have started leveraging more. One, we run campaigns in terms of, and this is on our intranet, we run campaigns in terms of what is the flavor for the month in terms of learning. Two, over the last 2 months, what we ran campaigns was not in the open environment, but also for people who already had the access to the system. Guys, while you have learned this, can you also expand your learning further? These are 2 or 3 options for you. So those were mail-based campaigns where we sent mailers to them, getting them to come back to the platform. Lastly, as the competition hots up into the social environment onto the platforms, this is what drives the people to get into that platform, learn more, be recognized publicly also that yes, you are some of the best learners. So it's a combination across these. Arun?
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. So to just add on, some of the great points that Sanjay made, I would just say, focus on, 2 or 3 things. First, make sure that, internal communication is extremely high, and make sure that in the initial phases, as you're shifting the portfolio mix from traditional forms to more self-paced learning and on-demand learning, you're able to recognize people who have actually started to take the lead. So make heroes out of people who are actually taking the initial steps. The second aspect is during this process, make the process fun. Introduce a lot of gamification, introduce codathons, hackathons, competitions, giveaways, whatever it takes for you to making sure that more people come onto the platform. And the third is try and see how much you could actually map the learning needs of every individual back to content that's relevant to them, so that it helps you to put a governance process around how the learning can happen, at least before people can start to look at learning what is essential and then start to learn what they desire to have on their jobs. So business is going to be more involved in seeing that transition happen as well. So getting that buy-in is very, very critical. So in addition to the points that Sanjay made, I'd say 3 things that we see as best practices from companies as well.
And I'll chip in one more item.
Sure.
Sorry, Ritu, I'll chip in with just one quick item. When all this is complemented with an open environment of learning, where people can subscribe to the learning directly, and we also start understanding which are the managers who want to hang on to their people and who are not giving approval for that. Those are the dirty tricks which we can start figuring out as to how do we make an employee somebody who's owned by the organization and not by a project. Those are critical items. Ritu, back to you, sorry.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for sharing this. Thank you, Arun. We have some more questions, so because of time constraint, I'll email it to you if it's okay with both of you, and you can take them offline.
Sure,
absolutely happy to.
All right. So everybody, with this question answer round, let's wrap up our today's session. And I really want to thank Sanjay and Arun for their time and invaluable information that they've shared with us today. And I want to thank especially Pluralsight for their partnership, who has made it possible to prepare this session. Thank you everybody for joining us in today's webinar session. Stay tuned for many such exciting sessions that concludes today's webcast. Thank you everyone.